The village of Lag has been at constant war with the demi-humans spread across this world. One of the soldiers, Kai, teams up with his friend Manso to take down one of the gorilla monsters, but even the power of friendship isn't enough to help him because Kai's fighting skills are absolute garbage. Now Kai is cornered and he most certainly would have died here, but at the last second, the gorilla is killed by Olha. He was appointed as the guardian of the village and blessed by the land god, and as such, he is the strongest soldier of them all. He is able to effortlessly cut the apes down one after another until eventually he comes face to face with the gorilla guardian. This is the strongest gorilla, so you think defeating it would be a challenge for Olha, but he is still able to cut it in half within seconds. Now that all the gorillas have been defeated, the soldiers start cutting into the gorilla bodies, and one of the soldiers hands Olha a ball that is suspiciously shaped like gorilla nuts. Olha drinks the liquid inside without a second thought, and after doing so, he begins to glow with a red aura. Thankfully, these things aren't actual gorilla balls, they are something called God Stones. Drinking the liquid inside is known to increase a person's strength and spiritual power, so it would make sense for everyone in the army to drink at least one so they can all grow stronger. But no, the rules say that they are only allowed to drink tiny drops of it. They all get their drops, and after drinking his drop of Godstone, Kai can already feel his spiritual power increasing. So he asks Manso if he can have some more. But unfortunately, he's just a foot soldier, so there's no way he will ever get permission to drink a full Godstone. The rules say that almost all of the Godstones must be given to a guardian bearer like Olha. So even though Olha is already strong, he gets to become stronger, while the rest of the soldiers are stuck at weak power levels. And no one sees anything wrong with this system. Once everyone returns to the village, a huge celebration is held in honor of their victory over the apes. But even here, the amount of food each person gets is determined by their status. So the strong people and the children of the chief get tons of meat, while the scrubs like Kai get a small plate of miscellaneous soup. The soup doesn't actually taste that bad, but Kai wishes he could get some of the good food too, but that will never happen while he's still a low-level soldier, so he vows to train and get stronger so he can raise his status. Immediately after the banquet is over, Kai heads outside and starts training as hard as he can, but it's hard for him to train well when you've barely gotten any food to eat all day. He yells out that he really wishes he could eat some rice balls right now, and a few moments later, Manso shows up and asks Kai what rice balls are. Kai says he isn't exactly sure because the word just randomly spawned in his brain one day, but he gets the feeling that rice balls would be tasty. There's something Kai has been wanting to talk about, so he points over to the hill where the village buries its fallen soldiers, and that particular hill is for all the people who had families. It is constantly visited and maintained by the families of the fallen, but in contrast, the hill next to it is an absolute mess. It is filled with the gravestones of people that no one cared about, so nobody bothers maintaining it at all. Orphans like him are bound to end up buried in a place like that once they die, with no one to visit their gravestones and no proof that they ever lived in the village. That's why Kai wants to grow stronger and survive long enough to live a meaningful life. And to do that, he has no choice but to eat his tiny food portions and train harder than anyone else. But even that wouldn't be enough to ensure his survival. He would need some kind of special ability to give him an edge on the battlefield, but he's not sure what he could use. At the same moment in the castle, Olha and his sister Jose are walking to their father's room. Olha tells Jose that she doesn't need to concern herself with war briefings because she isn't expected to fight like Olha. Even so, she tells him she wants to defend the village as well, but Olha dismisses her and says a daughter of the chief's family doesn't need to learn how to fight, and no matter how much she begs, he won't allow it. Jose thinks it's unfair that she doesn't get to fight in battles just because she's a girl. As if to rub it in, when she looks out the window, she sees Kai and Manso having fun and training. Since Manso is older and stronger than Kai, he's way better at fighting than he is, so Kai can't do much aside from play defense. Manso tells him he will never get stronger if he doesn't learn to attack, so Kai tries attacking, but when he does, he leaves himself wide open. So Manso is able to knock him back, causing him to fall to the ground and hit his head. As a result, Kai gets a massive concussion. He begins seeing memories of his past life in Japan come flooding back to him. And as his mind flips through memories, he distinctly recalls the word magic. However, when finally regains consciousness, he has no idea what magic means because the word doesn't exist in this world. This isn't the first time Kai has seen unfamiliar memories, and apparently in this world, there are plenty of people who see similar visions, but Kai doesn't think this is worth telling anyone about. Sure, the memories taught him about things like rice balls and magic, but that information is useless to him here, especially since magic was just a fairy tale in Japan anyway. But if he were somehow able to use magic, he would be able to show off during their next battle, and that would definitely raise his status. Meanwhile, over in the castle, the chief has just received a letter from one of the neighboring villages, and it sounds like the other village is being attacked by orcs, So in accordance with the alliance agreement between the two villages, the people of Banya are required to go help as soon as possible. The chief doesn't like the fact that he has to send the soldiers into battle again, even though they have barely gotten a chance to rest and recover from the battle against the apes. But Olda tells him that it is a soldier's duty to be marched around and to die for the village, so they don't have any right to complain. However, the chief reminds him that the soldiers are still a part of the village as well, so he shouldn't treat them as disposable pawns. Back in the barracks, Kai is having trouble sleeping because he can't get the idea of magic out of his head. Manso can tell that something is bothering him, so he asks what's wrong. Kai tells him it's not a big deal, but he had a dream about being able to create fire out of nothing, as strange as it may sound. He fully expected Manso to tell him he sounds stupid, but surprisingly, Manso says he has heard about something similar before. He was once told a story about a strange traveler who came to the village. The man wanted to start a fire, but he had no kindling on him, and normally, it would be impossible to make a fire without gear. But the man simply raised his finger and created a flame from thin air. Kai is surprised to hear that there's actually a record of someone using magic, but Manso reminds him that he only heard it from an old story, so there's no guarantee that it is true. Even so, hearing that story has motivated Kai to try learning to use magic, so the next day he heads out and finds a secluded spot so he can start training. He still isn't sure how magic works, but from what he can recall, magic requires some sort of mysterious energy, and the closest thing Kai can think of would be spiritual energy, so he tries using that. He holds out his finger and commands his spiritual energy to come out as fire, but it's not that easy. He realizes that he probably needs to gather his spiritual energy, so he begins trying to circulate it through his god's stones, but nothing happens no matter how much he tries. Meanwhile, orcs have been sighted just outside the neighboring village, and they've already killed a dozen soldiers, so the rest of the soldiers assemble to fight back. The soldiers wait outside the forest to see if the orcs are still there, and as soon as they spot the orcs, they charge in. The orcs begin attacking as well, but Manso manages to stab one through the heart immediately. Kai decides to rush ahead so he can get a kill as well, but then one of the orcs throws a dead body at him, and it pins Kai against a tree. The orc then walks up to him, and it is about to kill Kai, but before it does, it is shot by several arrows and is finished off by Manso. Manso yells at Kai for running ahead on his own and tells him to get back into the formation, but it looks like Kai hurt his leg when he got hit, so he can't walk on his own anymore. Meanwhile, Olha is decimating the orcs, and once they realize he's way too strong for them to beat, they all start retreating, and Olha refuses to let them get away, so he ditches all the other soldiers and chases after the orcs. That pretty much leaves them to deal with the remaining orcs on their own, and considering how hard it is for them to fight the orcs on their own, the soldiers are cooked. The squad leader orders all the soldiers to run and scatter so most of them can survive. But with Kai's injured leg, he and Manso have no chance of escaping the orc. Kai doesn't want to drag his friends down with him, so he stops Manso and tells him to go on without him. Manso doesn't want to leave Kai behind, but he knows he has no choice, so he apologizes and promises to visit his grave. Manso then runs off in one direction and Kai hobbles away in the other direction. He knows he is hopelessly outmatched, but he refuses to give up on his life, so when he hears the orc approaching, he tries to cast fire magic to defend himself, but it still doesn't work. A few moments later, the orc throws its blade at Kai, and it strikes his shoulder, severely wounding Kai, but on the bright side, the near-death experience makes sparks fly out of Kai's fingers, so maybe he really can use magic. But he might not live long enough to figure that out because the orc runs out of the bushes and starts strangling Kai. Just then, Kai notices the sparks coming from his finger, and he realizes what it means, so he points his hand at the orc's face, and with every bit of willpower he has left, he summons flames to burn it to death. The orc screams out in pain, and Kai manages to break free from its grip as a result. The orc eventually collapses from all the damage it suffered, and Kai is proud of himself for finally defeating a monster on his own. But there's just one problem: his hand is still on fire. He starts frantically trying to put the flames out, but a few moments later he begins to pass out because the fire is using up all of his spiritual energy. If he doesn't stop it soon, he's going to die from spiritual energy exhaustion, so he needs to think of something fast. All he needs to do is think of his spiritual energy as a dam that he opened when he used the fire magic, so to stop the fire, all he needs to do is stay calm and close the dam. But it's really harder for him to stay calm, because the orc is still alive, and it is walking towards him. Kai eventually manages to stop the flow of his spiritual energy, but the orc has already gotten to him and he can still barely move, so it picks him up and starts walking. However, it hasn't killed him yet, so Kai figures out that the orc must be blind from all the fire that it took to the face, and it doesn't realize that Kai is still alive. Kai doesn't want to die, but he knows there's no chance of surviving with the current state of his body, so he at least wants to take the orc down with him. So as the orc walks next to a cliff, Kai slashes it across the chest and both of them fall into the river below. Kai somehow manages to survive the fall and drags himself out of the water with his knife, but he is still dangerously low on spiritual energy, so he needs to act quickly if he wants to survive. He spots the orc's body nearby and this time is definitely dead, so he uses his knife to cut into it and pulls out the orc's god stone. Drinking the god stone liquid should help him regain his spiritual energy, so Kai doesn't hesitate and swallows the entire thing. As the spiritual energy begins flowing into him, Kai is already starting to feel better, so he lays down by a tree to rest. And now that he has a moment to think about it, he realizes that this is the first time he has ever drunk a full godstone before. His spiritual energy won't be an issue anymore, however, the wound on his shoulder is bleeding a lot, so he is convinced that he is still going to die out here. But on the bright side, at least he gets to die while looking at such a pretty sunset. Back in the village, all the soldiers have returned from battle and are getting ready to celebrate their victory over the orcs, but Manso isn't in a good mood right now. One of the other soldiers sees Manso looking depressed, so he comes over and tells him to just be happy instead. Just then, he notices that Kai isn't around, and he thinks it's weird since Manso and Kai are usually always together. It takes a few seconds, but it eventually clicks, and the guy realizes that Kai must have died, but instead of comforting Manso, he tells him to just get over it since Kai was worthless anyway. Kai spends the night passed out under the tree, and by the time he wakes up in the morning, he's surprised to see that he didn't die after all. In fact, he feels better than ever before. His broken leg has healed, and the cut on his shoulder has also sealed up too. He's happy with how things turned out, but he's also a bit confused because drinking a godstone shouldn't be enough to heal such severe wounds overnight. Kai thinks it might have something to do with the wall behind him, so he takes a look and realizes that it's a stone with a bunch of inscriptions on it. He tries to get a look at the inscriptions, but there's too much ivy in the way, so Kai uses his fire magic to burn it all up. However, his power is way stronger than it was before, so Kai gets blasted across the valley. While he is getting back on his feet, he takes a look at his reflection in the water, and he is shocked to see that there's a divine crest on his face now. He knows this is the sign of a guardian bearer, but a few moments later, the tattoos fade, so he assumes he was just imagining things. He walks back over to the stone so he can take a proper look at the inscriptions, but those words are in a language he doesn't understand, so he gives up and plans to start heading back to his village. He finds a cliff face that looks climbable, so he starts grabbing the rocks to escape, but for a split second, his divine crest appears again, and he accidentally crushes the rock he was holding onto. He falls back into the valley, and initially he thinks the rock must have been weak, but then he grabs another rock and he is easily able to crush this one as well. He realizes that he must have gotten a major power boost from drinking the godstone, and Kai is really happy about it. But while he is celebrating, he hears a voice telling him to go, and he doesn't want to find out where it came from, so he starts climbing the cliff at full speed. Once he gets to the top, he is amazed by how easy that was, and he is even more excited about his new strength than he was before. But he wonders if this is really the power of God's protection. The divine crest as a symbol of a guardian bearer is said to be granted by the land gods, but Kai doesn't recall ever getting power from a god. It might have happened while he was unconscious, but until Kai knows all the details, he had better keep this a secret from the other villagers for now. Back in the village, Manso has just finished making a grave for Kai, but just then, Kai comes walking up like nothing happened. Manso is really happy to see Kai again, and things pretty much go back to normal after that, with Kai going back to his usual duties. Only this time he's really good at his job. He was only meant to plow a small section of the field, but before he knew it, he had plowed the entire thing, and he barely even broke a sweat. Kai panics for a second because he is worried that his divine crest might be visible, but after looking at himself in the water, he realizes his secret is still safe. The crest probably only appears when he is trying his hardest to do something, so as long as he doesn't work too hard, he should be fine. The others ask him if something happened because he seems way stronger than before, and Kai can't think of an excuse, so he just admits that he drank the godstone of the orc he killed. The others are shocked to hear that since regular soldiers like them don't get to drink full godstones, but since Kai was injured and about to die, he had no choice. In fact, on his way back to the village, he had to drink the godstones of almost 40 orcs that he came across on the battlefield. So the others now understand why Kai is so strong, and Manso congratulates him for making it back alive. Meanwhile, one of the village women, Elsa, is spending a lot of time staring at Kai, so her friends start teasing her over it. At the same time, over in the village, Princess Jose goes over to the storage house to meet with the inventory checker. He tells her that he has finished preparing all the grave offerings, so she can depart for the grave cleaning whenever she wishes. Early the next morning, Kai is out practicing with his fire magic, and it has definitely gotten stronger since last time. But while he was doing this, Goz walks up and asks him to explain himself because he looks pretty suspicious right now. Kai can't disobey a direct order from the princess, so he tells her all about his fire ability. However, Joz doesn't seem too surprised by it since she has heard about similar abilities before. Although, ability users are usually members of special families or monks, so Kai is a bit of a rare case. Especially since he doesn't seem tired at all, even though he must have used a lot of spiritual energy. Boz recalls hearing a rumor that Kai suddenly became stronger after eating a bunch of godstones, so he must have a larger pool of spiritual energy than the average person. Goz asks Kai to train with her, and he has no right to refuse, so a few minutes later, the two are fighting the practice spears. Kai may be a lot stronger than he was before, but Joz is a guardian bearer, so he can't overpower her without straining himself a little, but he also doesn't want to accidentally reveal his divine crest if he tries too hard, so he needs to be careful. Once the duel is over, Kai heads to the well to get some water, and he is honestly surprised that he managed to get through the training so easily because he was holding back to avoid revealing his divine crest. That means he is so powerful that even a guardian bearer like Joz would stand no chance against him if he were to fight with his full strength. Just then, Joz asks him to bring her some water as well, so Kai rushes back over to her, and while she's washing her face, he asks her if all guardian bearers are equally strong. Joz tells him that she's actually one of the weaker ones because her father and brother are much stronger than she is. The strength of a guardian bearer depends on the protection of their land god, but the guardian bearer must also train on their own to get stronger. And when it comes to training, Joz is severely lacking. Technically, she doesn't need to train because women aren't required to fight in this village. However, as a guardian bearer, she has a duty to protect the people of this village in battle, so she needs to get stronger as well. Besides, the duty of a guardian bearer isn't just to win battles. Kai is confused, but before he can ask her to explain, a rooster makes the morning wake-up call, and Joz technically isn't supposed to be out here, so she has to get back to the castle before she is seen. Before she leaves, Kai asks her if she can explain what she meant when she said guardian bearers do more than just win battles. She has grown fond of Kai, so she would like to explain it to him, but it's against the rules, so instead, she asks him if he would like to accompany her on her monthly grave cleaning duty. Her land god is enshrined in the Ida village, so she will make the necessary arrangements for Kai to come, and once they are there, she will be able to explain everything. Kai agrees to her terms, so a few days later, Joz, along with Kai and a few other soldiers, head for the Ida village. They were assigned to protect Josie in case anything happened because this place is ape territory, but the guys find it a little odd that they were randomly chosen to escort Kozu when a different squad usually handles it. One of the soldiers in K's squad heard a rumor that Joz personally requested for Kai to accompany her, which is why the entire unit got assigned to the job. He asks Kai if it's true and Kai is about to confirm it, but Manso interrupts him mid-sentence and tells the others to leave Kai alone because there's no way the princess knows who he is. Eventually, they arrive at the Ida village, and to Kei's surprise, it is nothing but a pile of ruins. The village was overrun by monsters years ago, and as a result, the villagers were forced to abandon it. But there's still a gravestone here, and it is their duty to maintain it in the name of the land god. Although the power of the land god of this village has dwindled so much that the land is already completely barren. Just then, Joz comes over and says she wants to take a look around the village, so she needs a guard to accompany her. The man immediately offers to escort Joz, but she tells him she actually wants Kai to do it instead. Kai and Joz start walking around the village, and when they get to a small flower garden, Joz kneels down and starts praying. Kai wants to ask what she's doing, but she needs absolute silence, so she tells him to stay quiet. Red aura suddenly begins to pour out of Joz's body onto the flowers, and when she is done, she explains that she was simply praying for the land god's grace to gather here. This is a job that only guardian bearers bound to a land god can do, but since this village was abandoned, her land god's spirit has grown very weak, which is part of the reason why she isn't as strong as her brother or her father. And while the village of Lag is able to grow tons of good crops thanks to her father's strength, she is barely able to maintain this little flower garden with her power. For this reason, Jog's father has never neglected his training because if he were to let himself grow weak, then it would be the end of Lag village as a whole. While land gods do grant power to the guardian bearers, that power is dependent on how strong the individual is, which is why all the guardian bearers have to train and drink a ton of godstones. Kai and Joz eventually return to the rest of the group, and it's time for them to clean the gravestone, so they all head down into the ruins while a few soldiers stay behind to stand guard. While Kai and Joz are cleaning the gravestone, he takes a close look at it, and he realizes it's the same thing as that stone he saw in the valley. And when he touches the inscription on this one, all the words are automatically translated in his head. The inscription mentions the name of the land god that this gravestone belongs to, so Kai goes around to the other side to read more, but for some reason he can't read this part of the text. He can understand the individual words like pact and temple, but the words don't form a complete sentence, so he has no idea what it's supposed to mean. Joes notices Kai talking to himself, so she asks him if something happened. Kai is about to say something, but then gets caught off guard by Joes' cleavage, so he looks away and stays quiet. Suddenly, soldiers come in and warn everyone their group of apes are heading this way. They all rush outside and begin hiding the grave, but before they could leave, the apes show up, so the captain orders Kai and Manso to escort Joes back to the village, while the rest of them hold the apes off. However, while Kai and the others were fleeing, 2 apes cut them off, so Manso steps up to fight them. However, the ape tramples all over the flower garden that Joes has been working so hard to protect, so in a fit of rage, she rushes out and declares that she will kill it for what it has done. The ape is initially intimidated when it sees Joes' tattoos, but she has almost zero real combat experience, so she's shaking with fear. Once the ape realizes that she's a novice, it tries to kill her, but Kai jumps in and slashes it across the chest. Kai then spots the second ape attacking Manso's group, so he grabs the axe on the floor and uses it to slash the second ape in the shoulder, before jumping into the air and stabbing it in the head. Everyone is shocked that Kai was able to take the apes down so easily, but Joes is especially shocked because for a split second, she saw the Guardian Bearer tattoos on Kai's face. After returning to the village of Lag, Joes gets yelled at by Ola because he heard about how she nearly got herself killed after jumping into battle. He yells that this is exactly why he doesn't approve of her fighting alongside the soldiers, but Moloch calms him down. The most important thing is that Joes is safe, but for now, he thinks they should focus on increasing patrols around the area since the inspector will be coming soon. Olha agrees and heads out to inform the soldiers of the new patrol schedule, and once he is gone, Joes apologizes to her father for causing so much trouble. However, Moloch isn't angry. He has already heard the whole story, including the part where Kai single-handedly killed 2 apes, so he is excited to see what Kai does in the future. Meanwhile, Kai is out doing a couple of chores when he gets grabbed by a few of his friends. They are teasing him because everyone is calling Kai a hero for saving Joes during the expedition to Eda village, and there are rumors that Kai and Joes were getting really close out there. A few of the girls see this happen and think the boys are just messing around again, but Elsa can't take her eyes off Kai, so the others realize she must really like him. They tease her about it and warn her that if she doesn't go talk to him soon, someone else is going to steal Kai away from her. And it looks like they were right, because a few minutes later, Joes approaches Kai and says she would like to talk to him in private. Kai agrees to talk to her even though he has no idea what this is about, so the two of them walk into a back alley. First of all, Joes wants to formally thank Kai for saving her life in Eda. However, she could have sworn that she saw a divine crest on Kai's face while he was fighting the apes. But after taking a close look at Kai, she is convinced she was hallucinating because what are the chances that Kai randomly became a guardian bearer? Anyway, her failure in battle made her realize just how weak she is, so she plans to devote herself to training as much as possible to grow stronger. And she expects Kai to join her every morning from now on. Kai doesn't want to get roped into Joes' training, but he can't deny her request, so he agrees to train with her in the mornings. The whole time, Kai's friends have been spying on him from behind a tree that's way too small to hide them. And they have no idea what Kai and Joes are talking about, but they are really jealous that Kai gets to hang out with her. Later that day, Kai goes on with his business and starts chopping some wood when suddenly Elsa comes over with a bowl of water. Kai asks her if the water is for him, so Elsa explains that she thought he might be a little thirsty after all this work. Kai is grateful since he really was feeling thirsty, so he thanks her for being so considerate. Just then, one of Elsa's friends comes over and tells her to hurry up because they still have work to do. Kai just thinks she was being nice, but Manso knows what Elsa is trying to do, so he tells Kai he's a lucky man. Just then, Kai hears a strange bird call in the distance, and he recognizes it as the same one from the valley, but he's not sure why he's hearing it here. Later that night, Kai is trying to go to sleep, but he keeps hearing that bird call, so he gets out of bed and decides to follow it. There's a huge wall around the village, but with Kai's current strength, he is easily able to leap over it in one go. He then goes 0 to 60 in half a second and runs all the way back to the valley where this all started. Once he gets to the tree, he spots the stone tablet again, and now that he knows that this is a god's gravestone, he tries to read it, but for some reason, he can't. Even so, he thanks the god for saving him and spends the rest of the night diligently cleaning the stone. He even leaves a little offering for it before making the journey back to Lad village. But along the way, he gets a little hungry, so he drinks some water from the river and picks a few fruits off a tree. He is amazed by the amount of food he can get in the forest, so he wishes he could live here, and then a great idea comes to mind. He could just build a house for himself out here. But to make a house, he's going to need to get some wood, so he climbs a nearby cliff and finds a tall woody tree to cut down. Although now that he's up close to it, he's not sure how he's going to cut it down. He has his dagger with him, but a dagger is not going to be strong enough to cut a tree that's as big as this. Instead, Kai uses his fire magic and raises the output to form something like a fire blade on his hand. But while this may have worked for metal, a tree is made out of wood, so Kai accidentally starts a forest fire. Luckily, he managed to put the fire out before it got out of control, but he still needs to think of a way to cut this tree down. He was able to create fire from nothing, so he should be able to think of something to cut a tree down. And all of a sudden, a memory from high school chemistry comes flooding into his mind. And Kai must have paid attention in class during his past life because he now remembers everything there is to know about molecular structures. Now he knows that if he wants to cut the tree down, he just needs to find a way to break the bonds between the molecules, so he puts his hand up against the tree and starts trying to manifest his spiritual energy in a way that will allow him to cut through the tree. However, before he could get it to work, he hears something moving nearby, and it's coming from the direction of the valley, so he decides to go check it out. And as we look back at the tree, we see that Kai really was able to split the tree's molecules. Once Kai gets to the valley, he finds a group of children with climbing gear who look like they are about to climb down into the valley. Kai doesn't know what their intentions are, but it's his duty to protect that valley, so he jumps down fully prepared to smack a couple of children. But to his surprise, once he gets a bit closer, he realizes that these people aren't children. They're just short. Their leader steps forward and introduces himself as Poruk, the chief of the Kora people. Kai has never heard of the Koras before, and he thinks it's strange that their leader is able to speak the human language fluently. He explains that he and his people have had some interactions with human merchants before, and apparently humans consider their goods to be of high quality. But that's not important right now. Poruk wants to apologize for coming here without permission. He explains that they are here to fulfill an ancient agreement they have with the great valley god that resides here, and from what they know, the valley god resembles a human, so they believe Kai is the valley god. Poruk goes on to explain that the Koras have quietly lived in these woods for generations while worshipping the land gods, but a few days ago, the orcs attacked them in an attempt to take their land god. The Koras are really weak, so they stood no chance of winning and were forced to flee their home. Poruk addresses Kai as an ancient arbitration god and asks for his help to reclaim their home. Kai is having a hard time processing all of this, but first, he wants to know what an arbitration god is. Poruk explains that the legends say that an arbitration god is one who has received power of all creation in order to protect the creatures of the forest, but Kai finds it hard to believe that the legend is talking about him. Just then, one of the Koras speaks up and says he doesn't believe Kai is an arbitration god because the legends say an arbitration god should be a fierce warrior who punishes those who disturb the peace of their land, and Kai doesn't look fierce in the slightest. However, Poruk says he is absolutely certain that Kai is the arbitration god because he can see it clear as day. Figuratively. Years ago, Poruk once incurred the wrath of the valley god by entering this valley without permission, and as punishment, the valley god took both of his eyes. But in exchange, Poruk gained the ability to see the spiritual energy of the world around him, and when he looks at Kai, he can see the energy of the valley god flowing through him. So he must have received the valley god's protection. And besides, they already offered a sacrifice, so Kai has to help them. Kai gets confused by the mention of a sacrifice, so Poruk explains that earlier today he sacrificed his granddaughter Aru to the valley. Kai panics and asks them to show him where they left Aru, so they lead him to the rope that Aru used to descend into the valley. But that rope snapped a while ago, so she probably fell to her doom. Kai jumps down into the valley and finds Aru's body at the bottom, and thankfully she's still alive, but she's also bleeding a lot, so she won't last much longer. Kai remembers how his injuries healed when he first found this, so he tries to do the same thing by using magic. All he needs to do is imagine the injuries being healed, and as he does this, he is able to visualize the tissue of Aru's body. Kai had no prior knowledge of biology, but he now knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And with this valuable knowledge, he is able to heal Aru's wounds. Kai is honestly surprised that that worked, but it looks like Aru is going to need to rest for a while before she can get back up. In the meantime, Kai hears a commotion at the top of the valley, and he realizes the orcs are attacking. The Koras are practically defenseless against the massive orcs, so there isn't much they can do, but all of a sudden, Kai arrives and saves them by stabbing one of the orcs through the chest. In the time he was gone, a few of the Koras had already been killed, and the culprit is the orc leader. The orc leader displays its divine crest in an attempt to intimidate Kai, but its cleaver is still soaked with the blood of the Koras that it killed, so there's no way Kai is backing down until he gets his revenge. And he's not the only one who's outraged either, because he starts hearing a voice in his head telling him to kill the orc and instill fear in its heart before it dies. Kai realizes the voice is coming from the valley god, and as the valley god's guardian bearer, he is prepared to carry out its will. But before Kai begins fighting, Poruk steps forward and says he will assist him. He may not be as powerful as Kai is, but he is also a guardian bearer, so he can handle himself in a fight. Kai appreciates the extra help because it will make this a lot easier. And just so the orcs know what they are up against, Kai turns back to them and activates his divine crest as well. The confidence on the face of the orcs disappears as they realize that now have to fight two guardian bearers, but their leader still forces them to attack, so they charge forward and both are immediately killed by Kai. One of the orcs tries to sneak up on Kai while he is distracted, but Poruk rushes in and cuts it down to protect him. Kai thanks him for the help, but handling the weaker orcs is all Poruk can manage, so he tells Kai he's going to have to fight the guardian bearer orc on his own. Kai picks up a cleaver and slowly starts walking towards the final orc. The orc realizes he is screwed, so it tries using Talk no Jutsu. This one knows how to speak the human language, so he tells Kai he doesn't need to fight because the orc only intended to attack the Korors, he says, so he didn't mean to offend Kai. Normally, Kai wouldn't be so angry, but not only did the orcs kill a bunch of the Korors, they also did it in Kai's valley. The orc sees the blue spiritual energy of a god emanating from Kai's body, so he starts begging for mercy. But Kai has no mercy to give, so the orc attacks him in a desperate attempt at survival. However, Kai cuts his arm off with his energy blade and stabs the orc through the chest to pull out its godstone. As Poruk watches this happen, he is more certain than ever before that he is looking at the same god that took his eyes. A god has watched over the world since before the Age of Gods, the Arbitrator. This is the first time Kai has ever killed a guardian bearer, and Poruk explains that when you drink a guardian bearer's godstone, you can inherit the power of the deceased guardian bearer. It is way more potent than a regular godstone, so it should give him a massive boost in power. Kai cuts the godstone in half, but before he drinks, he offers a portion of it to Poruk. Poruk asks Kai if he's sure about this, but Kai says Poruk earned it when he helped fight against the orcs. Poruk eventually agrees to accept it and thanks him for his generosity. They then drink the godstone, and Poruk falls to his knees for a moment because the guardian bearer godstone has more of a kick to them than he anticipated. Kai seems to be fine at first, but a second later, he falls to the floor in agony. The Korors gather around and ask Kai if he's alright, but he tells them he just needs to rest for a bit, so he heads back down to the valley and warns them not to bother him or set foot in the valley without his permission. While Kai is resting, he has a nightmare from his childhood in this world. His original village was burned to the ground by a group of apes, forcing him to flee and seek refuge in Lag. The next morning, Kai wakes up and he is surprised to find himself covered by a blanket, and he is even more surprised when he realizes that Aru is sleeping next to him. He freaks out and asks Aru what she's doing, so she explains that she didn't want Kai to catch a cold, so she was keeping him warm. Kai may have saved her, but she was still sent here as an offering, so she swears to spend the rest of her life serving Kai to the best of her ability. Kai tells her he doesn't need to serve him, so she should just go home, but Aru says she can't do that. Poruk told her that if she didn't fulfill her role as an offering, then great misfortune would befall all the Taurors, so she refuses to leave. Kai starts trying to convince her to go home anyway, but then he realizes the sun is up, so he needs to get back to the village of Lag before anyone figures out that he left. Kai jumps up the side of the valley, but he is shocked to see the rest of the Korors still waiting there for him. He thought they would have left by now, but while Poruk is thankful that Kai saves them from the orcs, they don't really have anywhere to go. And since their old village was destroyed, they were hoping Kai would let them live here and devote themselves to the valley god. Kai kind of feels bad for them, so he agrees to let them live on the land surrounding the valley. However, he forbids them from entering the valley without his permission. He then gets ready to head back to Lag, but before he goes, Korors has something important he wants to tell him. A little while later, Kai returns to Lag, but as soon as he gets there, he has to deal with an upset Joes because he's late for their morning training session. She asks him what took so long, but Kai can't tell her he left the village to visit his valley, so he just says he overslept. A little while later, the chief approaches some of Kai's friends and asks them if they know where he is. Manso tells him that Kai is assigned to storage house duty today, so he should be near the castle, and once Vezin finds him, he challenges Kai to a duel. After hearing about how well Kai did when he protected Joes, Vezin wants to see how strong Kai is for himself. But of course, this is just a friendly mock battle, so he tells Kai he doesn't have to worry about getting killed. Kai is relieved that this isn't a death battle, but considering what Poruk told him, he's going to have to be careful. He said Kai should keep his status as a guardian bearer hidden for now since it hasn't been long since he acquired his power and he will be an easy target until he masters it. That means Kai has to keep his divine crest hidden at all costs, so he needs to hold back against Vezin even though he is weaker. Vezin makes the first move, so Kai jumps out of the way and starts dodging all the strikes, but he is getting really worked up, so his divine crest is visible. Kai manages to calm himself down to make the divine crest go away, but he still needs to fight Vezin, so he charges forward and strikes him with a spear. Unfortunately, Vezin is so beefy that the spear shatters when Kai tries to hit him, so now Kai is forced to fight barehanded. And to Kai's credit, he doesn't give up, but just like man number 1 in the gorilla fight, Kai gets punted away. Kai just had the wind knocked out of him, so there's no way he can keep fighting, but luckily, Vezin was satisfied with his fight. He extends his hand to help Kai up, and since he has taken a liking to Kai, he says that from tomorrow onwards, he will personally train Kai. Kai doesn't want to do it, but he can't say no to an offer from the chief. Chose is amazed that Kai was able to hold his ground so well against her father, but Olva doesn't seem so impressed because he still thinks Kai is just a regular commoner. However, Jose is already busy thinking of her next training session with Kai. After Vezin leaves, Manso and the rest of Kai's friends come over to check on him. And once they know he's okay, they start laughing at him because he got stuck training with Vezin. With Jose and Vezin demanding Kai's attention all the time, he hasn't been able to leave the village for a while, but tonight he finally gets the opportunity to leave. Kai returns to the valley and he is excited to be back, but then he spots a house with a fire going and he gets mad because he thinks the Korras moved in despite his warning that this place was forbidden. However, when he goes to see who did this, he realizes it was just Aru. Kai forbade the Korras from entering the valley, but Aru never actually left, so she isn't breaking any rules. Plus, she has been preparing for Kai's return, so she brings out a plate of food she made for him. Kai was about to tell her to leave, but then he sees the food she made, and all of a sudden, he doesn't mind letting Aru stay in the valley anymore. Aru asks him if he likes the food she made, and Kai tells her it tastes great, but aside from the flavor, this is the largest meal he has ever had the pleasure of eating. He almost wishes he could stay here forever because his food portions back in the village are usually really tiny. But to Kai's surprise, the next day when he goes to the cafeteria to get his food for the day, he receives a decently sized portion. The lady tells him she's giving him extra because he has been working really hard lately. Kai is thankful for the extra food, but his friends get jealous, so they ask the lunch lady why Kai is the only one who gets special treatment. She then reminds them that they've been slacking off all day, so if they want extra food, they are going to have to work hard for it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cafeteria, Elsa is serving some of the other villagers, but she was so distracted looking at Kai that she accidentally dumped a bunch of extra food on this random guy's plate, so now she has to convince him to give it back. Over the next few days, Kai continues his routine of sneaking out of the village at night to check up on the valley, and while he's there, he decides to help Aru build a house. But there's no way he can get it all done in one day, so the first thing he does is cut down a tree with his energy blade. The next morning, he returns to Lag and spends the day training with Jose, then that night, he goes back to the valley to continue building. He is starting to get used to coming and going without anyone noticing him, and he really enjoys life in both villages. One day, he and his friends are tasked with moving this huge boulder to make space for some new fields, but even with all of them working together, they can't budget at all. And seeing that everyone is struggling, Vezin decides to step in and help out for today. Everyone gives him some space, so Vezin grabs the boulder and starts lifting it with all his strength. Even for someone as strong as Vezin, a boulder like this is still a huge challenge. But after a few seconds, Vezin finally gets the rock out of the ground and even lifts it over his head. Now that the rock is out of the ground, this land can finally be tilled for farming, and with the extra farmland, the village of Lag will prosper even more, so Vezin is happy. Seeing Vezin like this motivates Kai to become a good guardian bearer just like him. So later that night, while Kai is in the valley, he starts practicing with his powers and attempts to make a flower grow. But no matter how much energy he pours into it, the flower just won't respond. He may be physically strong now, but there's still a lot that Kai needs to learn before he can call himself a proper guardian bearer. The next morning, Kai returns to Lag, and normally no one wakes up this early in the morning, but today, Kai runs into Elsa in the flower fields. He asks her why she's up so early, and she explains that she just wants to admire the flowers while they are in bloom. Kai has never really paid much attention to the flowers before, but he admits that they do look beautiful. Elsa says that these flowers remind her of the ones that used to grow in the village that she and Kai grew up in. Kai is confused, but Elsa goes on to talk about how when their village was burning down, they still tried to at least save the flowers. It takes Kai a second, but he eventually remembers that Elsa was part of his original village as well. Elsa is mad that Kai didn't remember her since she was right there with him when the village was destroyed, but in Kai's defense, he was really young back then, so most memories are fuzzy. Kai may not have been paying attention to Elsa, but she has definitely been paying attention to him, and she thinks it's amazing that he was able to earn Vezin's attention. However, Kai tells her he still has a long way to go because compared to Vezin, Kai is still a weakling. He still has a lot he needs to learn if he wants to become stronger, because that's the only way for him to survive. Elsa remembers Kai saying the same thing on the day their village burned down, But Kay's memory is still a bit foggy, so she explains what happened. While all the villagers were evacuating, they were suddenly attacked by an ape, and none of them knew how to fight, so they were doomed to be slaughtered. However, Kai fearlessly ran at the ape and grabbed its leg. Of course, Kai was way too weak to actually harm the ape, but his bravery bought enough time for Vezin to arrive and rescue them. Kai was relieved that Vezin saved them, but he was also frustrated by the fact that he could barely do anything to help, so he swore that he would do whatever it takes to grow stronger. But then again, his oath may not mean much since he forgot about it until now. Elsa tells him it actually means a lot to her, because on that day, even if it didn't feel like it, Kai saved all the villagers, so in her eyes he will always be a brave hero. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, the apes and the orcs are fighting each other, and the orc general is absolutely dominating the battle. Even ape guardian bearers stood no chance against him and was instantly beheaded. With this, the orcs acclaimed victory over the apes for this territory, and now their next target is Kay's Valley. And right now, Kai is blissfully unaware of the incoming threat. Nothing has happened to the valley yet, so Kai goes back to Lag, and the next morning he's put on storehouse duty. While there, he finds a grain of wheat on the floor and wonders if he can use this to make rice balls because he really wants to try them. Just then, Elsa walks up to him and she overheard Kai talking about rice balls, so she asks him if he can explain what it is. Kai doesn't really know how to explain it, but he knows it's supposed to be really tasty, even though he has never actually eaten one. A few moments later, Manso comes in and tells Kai he should stop chatting with Elsa and get back to work already because they still have a lot of bags to move. Kai apologizes and picks up more bags, and Vezin tells everyone to hurry and hide the bags of food in the cellar before the inspector gets here. Olva approaches Vezin and asks him if it is really necessary to hide the food from the inspector, but Vezin tells him that the village's food reserves are low, so if they don't hide some food from the inspector, then the villagers' food portions would shrink. Olha doesn't seem to care since a little starvation never hurt anyone, but Vezin actually cares about the well-being of his people, so he won't let anyone starve on his watch. Kai and his friends aren't sure about all the details, but they heard that an inspector is coming from the Central Plains, and they need to hide some of their food so he doesn't take it all. They also heard that the inspector is a guardian bearer who is even more powerful than Vezin, but he doesn't use his power for noble reasons like Vezin does. A few hours later, the inspector arrives, so the gate is open for him, and Vezin comes out to greet him. The first thing the inspector does is complain about the number of demi-humans in the area because he got attacked by some apes on the way here. According to the inspector, there were around 10 apes there, but he managed to fight them off on his own, so he is alright. Jobs is impressed because it takes some serious strength to take down 10 apes on your own, but she's not impressed when she actually meets him. Gandalf looks like a toad, and the first thing he does is insult her for being a weak woman. He then insults Olha as well for being weak and neglecting his duty to kill all the demi-humans in the area, and neither of them can talk back to him. A few seconds later, another man enters the village gate, so Vezin asks him if he is part of Gandalf's group. However, that's not the case. The man says his name is Nada, and he was sent here by the Monastery of Maz. He just happened to follow the same path as Gandalf, which is why they arrived at the same time. Gandalf goes to inspect the village's storehouse, and he is disappointed because there isn't much grain here. As a tax collector, Gandalf takes great pride in taking as much as he can from small villages, so he asks Vezin if this is really all the grain that the village has stored up. Vezin swears that he would never even consider evading taxes and assures Gandalf that this is all the grain that the village has. He makes up an excuse that the weather has been poor lately, so they haven't been able to grow much. However, Gandalf decides to use the weather as an excuse to stay in Lag for a while because he is suspicious. Mazin has no choice but to agree to Gandalf's request, but this basically means they are going to be forced to pay for all of Gandalf's luxury demands. Jobs doesn't like it, but Vezin tells her there's nothing they can do because Gandalf is an official inspector, and going against him is the same as going against the king. A little while later, Kai is walking outside when he sees Nada tending to one of the graves. He thanks him for looking after the graves, but Nada says he is just doing his job as a monk. He has heard rumors about Kai and knows that he suddenly became strong after eating a ton of God's stones, so he says the same thing happened to him. As part of his training at the monastery, Nada has had to eat a lot of God's stones, allowing him to become really strong. Kai is intrigued and asks Nada if his strength is comparable to that of the Guardian Bearers, so Nada proudly displays his divine crest as proof of his strength. Kai is even more amazed now because he didn't realize that Nada was a Guardian Bearer, but Nada tells him that's not the case. He may have a divine crest, but he never actually received protection. Kai had no idea it was possible to get a divine crest without a god's protection, but according to Nada, if you train hard and grow strong enough, you can potentially manifest a divine crest. While Kai and Nada are talking, Gandalf has just been served an extravagant meal in the castle, But he isn't satisfied with what he has received. His server explains that this is the best they can do with their current food reserves, but Gandalf doesn't care and demands more food even if a few of the villagers have to starve. As a result of Gandalf's demands, the portion sizes for the villagers' meals have become ridiculously tiny and they aren't happy about it. They wish Gandalf would return to the capital already so they can go back to eating the way they used to, but they can't force him to leave. Meanwhile, in Vezin's room, Nada is having a meeting with him to discuss a serious matter. There have been sightings of a large group of orcs, and this group is much larger than normal, so Olha is worried that it may be an invasion. Nada assures him that he doesn't have to worry about that since the group isn't large enough to invade the human kingdom, but it's still a huge threat, so Nada would like to pursue the orcs. However, he isn't familiar with this area, so he asks if Vezin would offer some assistance. Vezin understands, so he says he will arrange for some people to escort Nada in his mission to hunt down the orcs. That night, Kai heads back to the valley and he has some bad news for Aru. He was chosen to be part of the squad that will help Nada track down the orcs that have been running loose in the area, so he won't be able to return her until the mission is over. Aru understands, but she is worried that Kai might never return to the valley again if he leaves. However, Kai assures her that he will return no matter what happens. After all, he is the guardian bearer of this valley, so he has a duty to protect it. Kai then climbs out of the valley to meet with Porik. He explains that he's going to be hunting a group of orcs that showed up in the area, and Porik suggests that they might be here looking for the group that Kai killed a few days ago. Kai thinks Porik might be right, but he doesn't think it will be a problem because he is prepared to handle whatever the orcs throw at him. The next morning, Gandalf is still lazing around like a bum while a squad is sent out to track down the orcs that Nada is looking for. Olha and Vezin watch as the squad departs, but Olha doesn't think it was a good idea to send Joes on this mission. Normally, Vezin would have sent Olha, but he has to go after the apes that supposedly attacked Gandalf on his way here. Besides, Kai is with her, and Vezin trusts him, so he is sure Joes will be alright. Just then, Elsa comes running out of the gate because she has something she wants to give Kai. She did her best to recreate those rice balls Kai was talking about by using wheat, and she would like him to try it. Kai thanks her for the thoughtful gift, and for some reason, whenever looking at the rice balls reminds him of his mother, even though he has been an orphan all of his life in this world. Manso then calls out to Kai and tells him to hurry up, so Kai thanks Elsa again and puts the wheat balls in his shirt for later. The group then heads out, and after traveling for a while, they come across a horrific scene. There are dozens of dead apes and orcs scattered all over the place, and Nada believes that the orcs they are chasing must have gotten in a fight with the apes. However, there are a lot more ape corpses than there are orcs, so it looks like the orcs won the battle. But Kai has no idea why the orcs would do something like this. Joes tells Kai that they might be pursuing the same thing that Nada is after because she overheard his discussion with Vezin and Olha last night, although she didn't catch all the details. Nada comes over, and since Kai and Joes are curious, he explains that he is here because of a prophecy. According to the prophecy, a powerful god is supposed to appear in these lands, and it is Nada's job to find this god and its gravestone before it falls into the wrong hands. It is said that whichever species claims the god will acquire incredible power, so he can't afford to let the demi-humans find it first. Kai asks what kind of god this is supposed to be, so Nada tells him it is a wild spirit that no one can control. It has unfathomable power, and it is impartial to good or evil, kind of like an arbitrator. After hearing this, with everything that happened in the valley, Kai realizes that the god Nada is looking for might be him, but he can't tell him that. The group continues walking, and after a while, they come across a village that is in complete ruin. Kai thinks the orcs might have had something to do with this, and before long believes this must have been the work of the orcs, and Joes immediately rushes forward because she wants to help the villagers who got attacked. Nada warns her that it could be dangerous down there, but she can't just ignore people who are in trouble. Once they arrive at the village, they discover that a lot of the homes have been destroyed, and there are a few dead Uzels on the floor over there. The Uzels are a quiet and peaceful species, so they aren't hostile towards humans, but whatever did this definitely was. Kai spots an orc axe on one of the fences, so everyone is immediately put on guard, and they tell Joes that they should get out of here before any more orcs show up. However, Joes thinks some of the Uzels may have been able to survive, so she's not leaving until she searches the village for survivors. Nada also thinks they should search the village, but mostly because he wants to take a look at the land got here. In that case, Manso asks Kai to go with Nada while the rest of them stay behind to guard Joes. As Joes and the others walk through the village, they discuss how strange this situation is. The village is completely empty, yet the damage to the buildings is minimal. Normally, orcs would cause much more destruction if they were going to attack a village like this. Just then, Joes notices some blood on the ground, and the trail leads over to a shed, so she thinks there might be an injured Uzel inside. Meanwhile, Kai and Nada head into the village shrine to take a look at their god's gravestone. It is pretty dark, so Nada decides to use his spiritual energy to create some fire, but Kai warns him not to draw too much attention because there might be orcs nearby. Nada is surprised that Kai is so calm because most people would freak out upon seeing a man create fire from nothing. He wonders if Kai has seen a technique like this before, but Kai can't exactly explain that he knows how to use fire too, so he just tells Nada he heard about it from a story. Although Nada doesn't seem to fully believe him. Back on the surface, Joes calls out to the person inside the shed and says she isn't going to harm them, but as she opens the door, the only thing that comes out is a dead orc. As for Kai and Nada, they have finally found the gravestone, so Nada takes out a little notebook and uses it to translate the words on the gravestone. Meanwhile, Kai goes around the back to secure the area, but to his surprise, he finds a Uzel girl lying on the floor. Kai and Nada take her back to the surface, and along with the Uzels, they found 3 orc corpses in total. Seeing as there are only 3 orcs, Nada realizes that this isn't the orcs' main force, and judging by the woman's clothes, it looks like she was this village's guardian bearer. The others are surprised to hear that since female guardian bearers like Joe's are rare. And according to Nada, the Uzel's guardian bearer was clutching the entire fight alone. Uzels by nature are very weak, so normally they could never hope to defeat even a single orc. Yet this woman was able to kill the 3 orcs to allow some of her people to escape, even if it did end up costing her life. And knowing that other female guardian bearers can accomplish such great things gives Joes hope that she can also be strong enough to fight and protect the things she cares about. They all hold a little funeral in honor of the dead Uzels and their guardian bearer, but it looks like the guardian bearer's godstone was taken, so her land god's protection was probably transferred to another person. Speaking of land gods, Menso asks if Nada found what he was looking for when they went down into the shrine, but the god here wasn't the prophesied one. There were only 2 paths after the Orc Ate battlefield, so if only 3 orcs came this way, then that must mean that the main force went the other way. Kai takes one look at the map and realizes that the path Nada is talking about leads straight to his valley, so he immediately volunteers to run out ahead to check things out because he can't let the orcs invade his valley. Nada thinks it's strange that Kai seems so motivated about this, but he decides to let him scout ahead, so Kai takes off running. Meanwhile, in the valley, Porik and the other quarters have just learnt that a group of orcs is heading straight for this valley. Porik knows that without Kai here, they are pretty much doomed, so he tells Kechek to gather as many people as he can and hide while Porik faces the orcs. He is aware that he stands no chance, but as his people's guardian bearer, he can't sit around and let them be slaughtered, so he plans to hold them off and hope that Kai can make it here in time to save them.